I'm sorry to say it, guys, but being a mass monster is super unhealthy. That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. Just a reminder, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a chemist, nor do I pretend to be either of those things. I do not encourage the use of any substances, legal or illegal, and this video is strictly for educational and entertainment purposes only. Do not take this as medical advice. So, when it comes to bodybuilding, strongman, powerlifting, everybody wants to be the biggest guy in the room. I have wanted to be that guy for a while, and I had to stop because I recognized it just wasn't healthy. I still have to fight the urge to try and gain muscle mass and be big Xander again. But basically, overall, there's a lot of factors that just play into even large amounts of muscle, lean tissue, is unhealthy. So let's get into those factors, shall we? The biggest one is blood pressure. Obviously, when you're heavier, you tend to just have higher blood pressure, as well as if you're on steroids or other things like that, it will naturally increase your blood pressure. If you're consuming large amounts of food, you're going to be consuming large amounts of sodium and other electrolytes that will also increase your blood pressure. Now, blood pressure can lead to a lot of issues, including but not limited to higher propensity for blood clots, stress on your veins, stress on your heart, and more importantly, well, I guess not necessarily more important, but oftentimes what it actually impacts directly, kidney health. Because a lot of people don't realize that because so much blood has to be processed, your kidneys get a lot of problems from having high blood pressure. The heavier you get, the less you can rely on things like stimulants and neurocognitive enhancers because they're typically stimulant based. And when you take something that's in the stimulant family, it will typically constrict your blood vessels and raise your blood pressure. Naturally, that's not good for bigger people who have to have more blood flow in their body because they have more muscles. So there's actually even this argument in the bodybuilding sphere that it's healthier to be 300 pounds fat than 300 pounds muscle. Granted, that's not the same as being 230 pounds fat and 230 pounds muscle. It's probably better to be muscle at that point. But the heavier you get, the more it switches. And the reason being is because your body has to supply a lot more blood towards muscle tissue than fat tissue. That means your blood's going to get thicker. That means you have to have more red blood cell count. Overall, it's just the way it is. It's one of those things that the more muscle you have on your body, the more nutrients it requires as well, because when you have more fat content, your fat wants to stick around. Muscle's more so fleeting, so you have to eat more, which is more stress on all of your internal organs. There's also the fact of the matter that eating massive amounts of food just really can hurt your gut. A lot of people simply can't digest that amount of food. On top of that, insulin is a huge factor. Many people who get to that weight have to consume massive amounts of carbohydrates, which means that your insulin is working at an all-time high, and you will become, most likely, insulin resistant. Fat or muscle both actually experience this problem. There's a reason that bodybuilders have to use things like insulin, things like metformin, all of these factors to help keep insulin sensitivity up. Because when you get bigger, insulin sensitivity will go down because you need to process more carbohydrates with your insulin. Overall, there's a lot of other issues, such as sleeping. This is actually a huge one. For example, speaking of mass monsters, Brian Shaw actually had a thing where if he slept on, he used to sleep on his face like this so that he wouldn't have sleep apnea. Because that's one of the ways he could prevent it, was sleeping on his side, but he had to have his arm up. He actually was so heavy, at like 400 pounds, he cut off the nerves to his arm, and his arm started to atrophy. And it took a very long time to figure out why this was happening. And then it turned out he needed to start sleeping on his back so that he wouldn't keep cutting off circulation to those parts of his body that he would rest on. Crazy enough. And then when he started sleeping on his back, he developed the one that's the bigger issue for people, sleep apnea. So sleep apnea when you're heavier is actually a huge problem. Simply having more mass just around the neck, which happens a lot to fat people, will cause you to essentially suffocate in your sleep. I mean, obstructive sleep apnea, that's as to my understanding, that's essentially the whole entire premise behind obstructive sleep apnea, is that you stop breathing in your sleep. Now, obviously, you can attenuate all of these issues as best as you can. Now, let's say you're dead set on being a mass monster. You want to be 290 pounds shredded, which is unfeasible, like not really feasible, but let's say you wanted to do it. Well, you could take blood pressure lowering medication. You can take things to reduce the amount of left ventricular hypertrophy you will experience. You can take things to help with you can use a CPAP machine when you sleep. You can have all the cardio in the world, and guess what? You still probably won't be as healthy as somebody who lives a relatively normal, healthy lifestyle at 200 pounds, because it's just not healthy to be that heavy, especially for kidney stress and, like I said, insulin supply. Overall, I mean, it's one of those things that's kind of annoying, because I'm one of those people that's drawn to be massive. I used to be not massive. I know 260 pounds isn't exorbitantly big, but I really liked being that size. I felt happy. But then, do you know what one of my bigger issues was? Breathing. You simply have more mass on your chest and on your back and on your shoulders. It condenses everything. I know it sounds silly, but it feels tighter. I doubt that it would end up in a result of being diagnosed with anything like asthma, but at the same time, it simply is harder to breathe. With the blood oxygen supply as well, you have to now supply oxygen to much more muscle. So when you go for a run or you go for a walk, you probably will become more out of breath than somebody who doesn't have that amount of muscle unless you keep your cardio up. Now, this isn't to say that somebody who's 260 pounds can't be healthy. I'm not saying that, because people can be healthy at larger body weights. It's just, statistically speaking, you're better to be at a moderately muscular and moderately normal fat mass smaller. So like even Greg Doucette says being lower body fat percentages isn't really healthy. Everyone's talked about this, from Greg Doucette, Ryan Russo. I've even heard Derek from More Plates talk about this, Vigorous Steve. Being lower in body fat isn't always healthy. That's why they say like 15% body fat is actually more healthy, but you don't look shredded at 15% body fat. You're nowhere near stage lean at 15% body fat unless somehow you hold your fat mass in a very strange way. But overall, it's just the nature of the beast, I guess you could say, being moderately muscular. I don't know that there's any specific number, because the issue is, if I were to say 230 pounds is how big you could be muscular-wise and 15% body fat, well, then somebody who's 7'8" is going to come on here and be like, what? No, that's ridiculous. Well, not 7'8", but like 7 feet tall is going to be like, what? No, that's ridiculous. 230 pounds, I'd be starving myself. And they would be correct. They'd probably be starving themselves. So I can't say that there's any one number for everybody. That would probably rely on a lot of research for yourself. But I would imagine that 15% body fat between, I don't know, I would say a range of 10 to 20% body fat is probably ideal. Towards 20% is borderline getting unhealthy, I would say. And then once you go over that, you're probably starting to get into more of overweight territories. But then having more musculature in itself isn't always more healthy. And I mean, everybody's got their own personal decisions, and everybody also has their own personal health risks. So if you have really healthy kidneys, you also have a low blood pressure, typically speaking, and then you gain weight and you have a normal blood pressure. I mean, I can't say that that's necessarily a bad thing in this context, because simply changing your weight and making you have a normal blood pressure instead of having a low blood pressure constantly would actually be a good thing. But that's not everybody. In fact, that's very statistically small, almost statistically insignificant in the population. Not to mention, having more musculature means that there's more muscle protein breakdown. Your kidneys have to process more. Overall, it's way more organ stress, even if you're not on any drugs at all. That's the other thing I want to get across, is being a mass monster. You can be on absolutely zero drugs, and being that heavy is just simply more stress on your body. That's just the way it is. And I know that Vigorous Steve and Ryan Russo and Derek from More Plates, More Dates always talk about attenuating stress. And they always talk about trying to decrease the amount of stress that you're putting on your body so that you're healthier if you are going to be doing these things. And I think that risk mitigation is extremely important because people are still going to do things where they're going to be 300 pounds. I mean, you look at Craig Goliath, he's humongous. I have no idea what weight he is now, but he's always huge. And yeah, I mean, that's just the fact of the matter is attenuating all the stress factors on your body is important, especially if you're going to be doing it. And I think it's important. But overall, that is going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to this channel if you like this kind of content, and like it if you like this video. Until next time, remember to keep those shoulders back and down when you lift. And don't just have a good one. Have a great one.